Hello, everyone. This is my final project. The cases that I chose are Terry versus Ohio and Miranda versus Arizona. I chose Terry versus Ohio because of how relevant it is to this day. Terry versus Ohio is a landmark case that has come under great scrutiny in recent times, with people claiming that Terry versus Ohio results in racial discrimination. This case is significant because it is not unconstitutional for officers to stop and frisk any individuals that the officers reasonably suspect to be armed and involved in a crime. The Court of Terry versus Ohio ruled in favor of the police officers. Terry versus Ohio is also known as a stop and frisk. Terry and two other men were observed by undercover policemen. The police believed that the men were casing a jewelry store and planning a robbery of the business. The men were pacing in front of the building, which the officers deemed to be suspicious. The undercover officers decided that they would stop the men, pat them down, also known as a frisk. The officers discovered a handgun on two of the individuals and arrested them on gun charges. The Supreme Court ruled that the search was reasonable under the Fourth Amendment because the officers acted on a hunch to protect crime from occurring. The court also claimed that the individuals had weapons, which posed a threat to the officers who were checking up on suspicious behavior. The new legal standard that was a result of this case is that it is not unconstitutional for officers to stop and frisk an individual that officers reasonably deem to be armed, to be planning a crime, or to be involved in a crime that already been committed. The officers are not able to search inside pockets, but can do a frisk on the outer clothing of suspects to search for illegal contraband or weapons. Stop and frisk had already been a common police procedure. The Supreme Court ruling allowed the practice to be validated under law. The case impacted the judicial system because it allows officers to constitutionally stop and frisk individuals based on reasonable suspicion. This case is just another tactic for police to prevent crime in their cities. The second case I chose is Miranda versus Arizona. I chose this case because I want to be a police officer one day, and Miranda rights are read by police officers during every arrest. This case is significant because it requires that all individuals that are getting arrested must have their rights read to them prior to questioning. This requirement can result in evidence being suppressed if the requirement is not fulfilled by the arresting officers. Ernesto Miranda was arrested and brought into questioning on charges of kidnapping and rape. After hours of interrogation, Miranda gave a written confession to the officers. The officers did not advise the defendant that he has a right to an attorney and one would be appointed to him if he could not afford one. The Supreme Court ruled that the interrogation violated the Fifth Amendment of the defendant. A defendant is legally allowed to waive the Miranda rights if they choose to do so after being told them. Had the written confession been given after the advising of Miranda rights, then the confession would have been admissible in court. The Supreme Court ruled that the written confession was not allowed to be used in trial, which resulted in a retrial of Miranda. Miranda was ultimately still found guilty, but the confession was not used as evidence in the retrial. The new legal standard requires that all detained suspects or arrested suspects must be advised of their constitutional right to an attorney and against self-incrimination before questioning regarding the crime that they're under suspicion for. This case has greatly impacted the judicial system because it brings new protection under law to suspects. If officers neglect reading Miranda rights to suspects that they are questioning, evidence that can be obtained prior to the advising can be deemed inadmissible in court.